Terry Talks Movies. I'm doing musicals this time because why the hell not? It's Wednesday, and so Wednesday videos are always a bit random, and I have been asked by people to do musicals. So I've got my top 13 musicals that I enjoy. Now, this list would change. If you ask me in a week's time, I'd probably come up with 8 or 9 other movies to replace on this list. It's a flowing, mercurial thing, but nonetheless, I still like musicals. Musicals on the stage here in Australia have got very weird in the last few decades. They're all what we call jukebox musicals, which means that they're musicals built around existing playlists of songs that people already know and like. So they're kind of like Spotify with dancing, and I don't like them. There's one at the moment called Anne Juliet. There are a number of other ones. There's an Elvis one that's just coming to Australia now. But I kind of like old school musicals where the songs aren't necessarily the ones people already like, but they were either written specifically for the movie or they were put in but fit in very well with an existing plot line. So we'll go to one of my obscurities. Now, a few of these are MGM musicals, but we'll go to my obscurities. First one is Kismet from 1955 with Anne Blythe and Howard Keel and the wonderful Dolores Gray. It's a story of a poet in Baghdad who accidentally finds fame and fortune because fate has touched him on the forehead and patted him on the ass, and his life goes in a really interesting direction. He's kidnapped by a bunch of thieves and taken to meet a brigand called Jawan, who thinks that he is somebody who cursed him many years before. He wants him to undo the curse and to find his estranged son. So he gives the poet 100 gold coins to go back to Baghdad and find Jawan's son. This leads him to an evil wazir, played by Sebastian Cabot, his very sensuous wife, Lalum, played by Dolores Gray. And in the meantime, the poet's daughter, Marsina, falls in love with the caliph who's been travelling among his people incognito, because in this kind of movie, caliphs always travel incognito among their people. It's a thing that goes back at least as far as Thief of Baghdad in 1940. This was the 5th version of Kismet made. It was made in 1914, 1920, 1930, and in 1944 there's a very popular version with Ronald Colman and Marlene Dietrich in it. But in 1948 it became a Broadway musical, and this 1955 version is an adaptation of that Broadway musical. It's got fantastic dance numbers, it's got great songs, it's got very witty dialogue. You've got to listen carefully to the dialogue in this one. It is very funny. And keep watching the people in the side of the screen, because you will see Mike Mazurki as one of the soldiers. You'll also see a really young Jamie Farr as an extra in one of the scenes. But I like Kismet. It was the first VHS tape I ever bought. It was really hard to buy VHS tapes to own back in the day. There were rentals, but before owning videos became popular, you'd only get a few titles that were released during Father's Day and Mother's Day and Christmas. And Kismet was the first one I got. A company called CEL released it, and it was widescreen, I think, at the time, which was kind of rare. I've liked the musical ever since. So that's the first one. The next one's also a 1955 MGM musical, which tanked. And that's a real shame. It was directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly, and it's called It's Always Fair Weather, with choreography by the wonderful Michael Kidd. It stars Gene Kelly, Dan Daly, and Michael Kidd as 3 soldiers who, at the end of World War II, make a pact to meet again in 10 years' time and to update each other on how their lives are going in Civvy Street after the war. It also stars Sid Charisse, who works for a TV show run by a woman called Madeline, who is played again by Dolores Gray.
To sing you a song. It's my latest recording, and I do hope you just love it. But even if you don't, I don't really mind, as long as you love me.
1955 was a good year for Dolores Gray, and she gets a couple of really good show-stopping tunes in there. There are incredible dance sequences. There's the I Like Myself dance with Gene Kelly riding roller skates through a city street as he realizes he's fallen in love with Sid Charisse's character. There's a dance sequence where the 3 guys dance with garbage can lids on their feet. There's a sequence where the 3 of them dance, each in a different location, doing the same dance, and it's timed and choreographed perfectly. This is one of those peak MGM musicals which doesn't, for some reason, get a lot of love, even though it is about middle-aged men questioning their life choices and making changes to improve them, and just reconnecting with the friends they had in the past and realizing that unless they change their path, they're going to stay the assholes they've become in the last 10 years. It really is about men finding their best selves and finding a non-toxic masculinity. Really ahead of its time in that way. If you haven't seen It's Always Fair Weather, you should check it out. Next up, we've got 2 Jacques Demy musicals, because you've got to have the Jacques Demy musicals in there. First one, of course, is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg from 1964. Beautifully pastel love story about a young girl who falls in love with a garage mechanic in Cherbourg in the 1950s. He gets conscripted to fight the Algerian War. Then they separate and she finds that she's pregnant. And because she can't find him again, she marries somebody else. And the 2 lovers meet years later on a snowy winter's night. All the dialogue is sung in French. All of the music is written by Michel Legrand. And it's one of the magic movies. It's got a parallel to that same magic that a movie like Tokyo Story has, where you can't quite figure out why it got that magical, but it does. And The Umbrellas of Cherbourg is just a beautifully sumptuous movie with pastel colours. It just works. Catherine Deneuve stars as a young girl. Nino Castelnuovo stars as the mechanic turned soldier. And it's just something special. It's the perfect date movie. If you're going on a date with somebody and they're a movie buff, you're going to take them to see The Umbrellas of Cherbourg if it's showing somewhere, because it's a guaranteed winner as a date movie. Next one, of course, is the next musical that Jacques Demy did. In 1967, The Young Girls of Rochefort, which is a much more light and upbeat musical. Not all the dialogue is sung, but there are a lot of songs incorporated into dialogue. Again, the music's by Michel Legrand. It's set on a sunny festival weekend in the town of Rochefort, and a pair of twins played by Catherine Deneuve and a real-life sister, Francois Dorliac, looking for love. They want to go to Paris and start their careers, and they're romantically involved with other people at the time. Their mother runs a cafe that sells chips and coffee, and she's played by Danielle Darrieux. And a carnival comes to town for the festival day. George Chakiris is one of the carnival guys. A couple of other people turn up. There's a beau of the mother turns up, played by Michel Piccoli. And there's also a musician and composer, an American guy, played by Gene Kelly. This is the last good Gene Kelly musical. And we get Gene Kelly singing in French and dancing in his last good musical role. And I don't count Xanadu because that's not a good movie, or a good musical for that matter. But there's a wonderful fairy tale pastel wonderfulness and a wonderful wonderfulness about The Young Girls of Rochefort, which I love. I could watch this movie 2 or 3 times a year and still have a lot of fun with it. It was shot on location, and they painted parts of the town pastel colours. And the way dialogue and song are incorporated is fantastic. There's a scene where Catherine Deneuve's character breaks up with her boyfriend, a gallery owner who's a total prick. And their breakup is a song where they each throw kind of insults at each other as a part of the song. Really fantastic movie. Love it a lot. Can watch it every year, and in fact I may well watch it after the end of January. That then takes us to Cole Porter, and you've got to love a Cole Porter musical. And I just realised I've been holding this mic all this time and it hasn't been connected to the camera. The travails of a YouTuber. But next musical I've got for you, again it's an MGM musical, because I've got to throw a few of them in there. They're the best of the best at this particular genre, and it is Kiss Me Kate. You've got to have a bit of Cole Porter in there. I love Kiss Me Kate. Again, it's got Howard Keel in it. It's from 1953. It's got Catherine Grayson playing Lily Vanessa, stage actress. Howard Keel playing Fred Graham, her estranged husband. Ann Miller playing a woman called Lois Lane, who plays Bianca in their version of Taming of the Shrew. You've got Keenan Wynn and James Whitmore playing Lippy and Slug, a couple of gangsters who sing Brush Up Your Shakespeare.
Brush up your Shakespeare. Start quoting him now.
Tommy Earl is in there as Bill Calhoun, Bobby Van and Bob Fosse. And even an Australian, Ron Randall, comes in at the start to play Cole Porter, even though he looks nothing like Cole Porter. This one's fantastic. It was made in 3D originally, but I don't have a 3D version of it. I do have a Blu-ray. Kiss Me Kate is one of the great musicals. The great thing that the stage musical of Kiss Me Kate did was blending the story of Taming of the Shrew with the backstage shenanigans of the actors and actresses. It just works in so many levels. It's a feel-good musical. It's fantastic to watch. It's a lot of fun. The dancing is next level, and particularly with people like Bobby Van and Bob Fosse doing dance numbers with Tommy Rowell and Carol Haney and Gene Coyne being the dance partners. Just the best. I love what this one does. There have been a number of different stage adaptations, including recently there have been stage adaptations, particularly in London and New York. But Kiss Me Kate is just one of the best. And the way it subverts expectations by getting gangsters singing songs. Just a ton of fun, and I could watch it again. It's another one of those ones I could watch 2 or 3 times a year and still have a great time doing it. Next up, we go back to 1943 for Stormy Weather, an all-black musical starring Lena Horne, Bill Robinson, Cab Calloway, Catherine Dunham, Julie Wilson, the Nicholas Brothers, Fats Waller. It's told in flashback as Bill Robinson talks to a bunch of kids in modern times, 1943, about what happened after he came back from World War I, how he met a beautiful woman played by Lena Horne, and basically the musical numbers and the rest of it slide in from that. It's a lot of fun in the same way Cabin in the Sky is. I do those as a double feature. The glorious thing about Stormy Weather is you got Lena Horne at the start of her career, Bill Robinson doing what he did so well, and you've got Cab Calloway in there as well, doing Jump and Jive, finishing it off with that incredible dance sequence of the Nicholas Brothers. This stuff is next level wonderful, and people are rediscovering the Nicholas Brothers dance sequence from the end of Stormy Weather and doing reaction videos to it in modern times. So yeah, this stuff has legs, and it's still relevant and still intrigues people and fascinates them today. I'm not sure whether I like this one more than Cabin in the Sky, because there are aspects of Cabin in the Sky I like a lot, but Stormy Weather, fantastic musical. It's incredibly cheap to find. I keep finding copies of it in thrift stores here in Australia on DVD, so it's not hard to find at all, and it's totally worthwhile as a musical and showing the different cultural viewpoints of America as it was in World War II, and featuring some of the best artists of colour from the time. Next up, I got a 1960s English musical directed by the same guy who directed Friends of Eddie Coyle and Bullitt, Peter Yates. It's the second musical starring Cliff Richard, who, as a performer, was a good singer but not a good or charismatic actor. And it is 1963's Summer Holiday, directed, as I said, by Peter Yates. It's about 4 bus mechanics, Don, Cyril, Steve and Edwin, who are bus mechanics in the London Transport bus depot, and they decide they want to go on a summer holiday to Greece, and they convince the bus depot to let them do up a bus as a kind of van conversion and drive all the way to Greece during the summer holiday as a promotion for London buses. They find an old AEC Region 3 RT bus, double-decker bus, and they convert it into a caravan. They want to go to the south of France. They're joined by a trio of young women, Sandy, Angie and Mimsy, one of whom is played by a young Una Stubbs, who played Mrs. Hudson in Sherlock. And young Una Stubbs was a fantastic dancer and incredibly beautiful. They also pick up a young girl called Barbara, who's pretending to be a boy, not very successfully to anybody who's not in the movie. And they end up passing through Yugoslavia and going to Greece. But Summer Holiday has a real vibe about it. The songs are on point, the dance sequences and the locations are great. They've got a good supporting cast of actors in there as well. Ron Moody's in there playing one of the villains, who later turned up playing Fagin in Oliver. Yeah, it's just a good feel-good vibe musical. There was a third Cliff Richard musical called Wonderful Life, which is still pretty good, but kind of a little bit self-indulgent. But Summer Holiday has that exuberant and xenophilic vibe about it, where young people in 1960s England wanted to find out about the world outside of England. And so they went on this kind of picaresque holiday, singing and dancing all the way and just having a good time, falling in love, falling out of love, going to exotic locations. It's just one of those feel-good, solidly entertaining musicals, even though there's a void at the centre of it called Cliff Richard. Next up, we go to 1983 for a movie directed by Felipe Mora, a superhero musical called The Return of Captain Invincible, starring Alan Arkin, Christopher Lee, Kate Fitzpatrick, Bill Hunter, Michael Pate, Graham Kennedy as the Australian Prime Minister, Max Phipps, Alfred Sandler, Garth Mead, It's got some racial stereotyping in it, but it's about Captain Invincible, who's also known as the Legend in Leotards, the Cape Contender, and the Man of Magnet, who is a superhero. When he was conceived, his parents were zoomed over by a UFO, which zapped them so their baby had superpowers. There's your origin story. Didn't take a whole movie, took 5 minutes of flashback. He's active during Prohibition and World War II, gets done over by the McCarthy-era moral panic of the anti-communist hysteria of the time, and ends up being a homeless derelict who has amnesia, who for some reason ends up in Australia, and the governments of the world need to find him because the evil Mr. Midnight, played by Christopher Lee, reemerges and steals a secret government weapon called the Hypno Ray, and they have to rehabilitate Captain Invincible in order to get him to stop Mr. Midnight and save the world. It's fun. It's made on a fairly limited budget. It was filmed in and around Sydney, and the songs are pretty good. Some of them are written by Richard O'Brien and Richard Hartley, who did Rocky Horror. Some of them are written by Billy Field and other people. Name Your Poison, the song where Mr. Midnight tempts Captain Invincible with alcohol, was actually filmed in the old Rozelle Power Station, which was literally across the street from where I used to live when I was living in Sydney, in a small apartment in Rozelle, which now costs $1 million to own. I was renting at the time. But yeah, this is a favourite. Friends and I used to watch this on VHS all the time, twice a year, mid-year and New Year's Eve. We'd always watch The Return of Captain Invincible. And it's a lot of fun. The special effects are no better than they need to be. But mixing Alan Arkin and Christopher Lee with a whole bunch of fine Australian actors, including Kate Fitzpatrick, who's a real hoot on Twitter at the moment, and Graham Kennedy as the Australian Prime Minister has a nice little cameo there where he's sucking up to the US President, played by Michael Pate, another Australian actor who made a whole bunch of movies in America. I just love this one. The soundtrack's great. Umbrella put this out on DVD. I don't know if they put it out on Blu-ray, but it's definitely got a DVD release and it's rock solid. And The Return of Captain Invincible should be in your collection if you like Ozploitation at all. It's towards the end of the Ozploitation era, but still a lot of fun and way ahead of the curve when it comes to superhero movies.
Today, New York. Tomorrow, the world.
Next one from 1978, I've also talked about on the channel as a vulgar pleasure. Thank God It's Friday. Thank God It's Friday. One of the worst musicals to ever get a Best Original Song Oscar for Last Dance with Donna Summer. It's got a whole bunch of intertwined stories in and around a disco in 1978, because discos had only just started to hit Los Angeles. It's got the Commodores in it. It's got Donna Summer. Deborah Winger's in there as well. Jeff Goldblum playing a sleazy disco owner. Valerie Landsberg's in there. Terry Nunn. Paul Jabara. It's just a lot of fun, and it's one of those musicals where a whole bunch of random weird people go to a disco. There's also the wonderful Chick Vanera playing Marv Gomez, the Leatherman, who steals the movie from me. I just like the way this movie plays out. It's kind-hearted and there's not a mean-spirited bit in it. If there's a bad guy in it, it's Jeff Goldblum's sleazy nightclub owner, whose Porsche gets destroyed over the course of the movie. Thank God It's Friday. Yeah, if you're of a certain age, you're going to like that one. And there weren't many real disco musicals out there. Yes, there was shit like Saturday Night Fever, which was a real bummer if you watch Saturday Night Fever as a movie and just ignore the strutting stuff with John Travolta. It's a bummer and the characters are all assholes. But Thank God It's Friday is a tonic to cleanse your palate after watching Saturday Night Fever. I like it much more than I like Saturday Night Fever, to be honest with you. Never liked any actors who cut off all their sideburns, even in the 80s. Next time I'm going back to 1933 for Gold Diggers of 1933, directed by Mervyn LeRoy and Busby Berkeley, who directed the musical sequences. Fantastic movie about 4 aspiring actresses, Ruby Keeler, Joan Blondell, Aileen McMahon and Ginger Rogers, who all try to get jobs in shows. It also stars Dick Powell as Brad Roberts, which is kind of a generic name. Guy Kibbe's in there as well. Billy Barty's in there. But you watch this one mostly for the wonderful dance sequences and the very surrealistic dance sequences that Busby Berkeley gives us out in this one. There's some kind of slightly risque numbers because this is just as the Hays Code came in. Petting in the Park with Ruby Keeler and Dick Powell, which is a lot of fun. There's a Shadow Waltz, We're in the Money. There's Remember My Forgotten Man with Joan Blondell, about men who were World War I veterans who had been forgotten during the Depression. And that one punches hard. You don't expect to see a number in a musical of this time, which actually addresses and confronts the audience with the social issues of unemployment and disenfranchisement during the economic depression. And I like that. I think that is the thing that lifts this one above many other musicals of the time, the fact that it is willing to say this is wrong and draw a line in the sand and really creates a work of art based on that. There's just something special there. Down to the last three now. South Pacific, 1958, had to do a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, and I like South Pacific. It's set during World War II on the Pacific Islands where there are US bases, there are nurses, there are sailors who are all horny, there are the native people, including Juanita Hall, who gets to sing Bali High, though they dubbed her voice for no good reason.
Bali High may call you any night, any day.
And it's about a nurse called Nellie Forbush who meets a French plantation owner who has mixed-race children. So this movie looks at racism in not a totally 100% confronting way, but in a way that a lot of musicals wouldn't touch at the time. Beautiful widescreen, and it's got this weird thing where the colour palette changes depending on the tune. It was totally stuffed up as a concept by the people who did the processing of the prints. But South Pacific has a certain weirdness and wonderfulness about it, which I really like. And because it is addressing issues that a lot of musicals wouldn't touch at the time, because musicals were seen as things that were supposed to be just frothy fluff and were really just there as pure sugary entertainments. Having musicals that had a bit of meaning to them and a bit of guts and a bit of honesty wasn't something that happened all the time, but in South Pacific it did. In fact, I've actually got a movie ticket from the first release of South Pacific in Australia, where they actually printed out proper movie tickets. It was given to me by a friend, and this was a really big movie at the time. It was shown in CinemaScope. It was only shown in really big theatres. I like it for what it says. I like it for the way it looks. I like it even for the botched colour palette changes to reflect the mood of each scene. It was a bold attempt to do something different with cinema, even if it wasn't entirely successful. Next one I've got, going back to 1943. I'm jumping all over the place this time around. 1943, The Gang's All Here. Musical starring Alice Faye, Carmen Miranda, James Ellison, directed by Busby Berkeley. I like this one because it's got so much phallic symbolism in it. It's really funny. It starts out with a man singing Ari Barroso's song Brazil, which inspired the movie Brazil as well. And there are a whole bunch of exotic goods being unloaded from a ship, and you've got the fruit hat with Carmen Miranda singing the song as well. It's just an over-the-top movie musical during the war years, and the supporting cast is pretty good as well. You got Eugene Pallett, who played Friar Tuck in The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, and was also an incredible early adopter, a doomsday prepper. He went up to Oregon and got himself a bunker in Oregon because he thought that World War III was going to start in the 1950s. But leaving that aside, Charlotte Greenwood's in there as well. She's a really interesting older actress and dancer. Edward Everett Horton's in there. Frank Fallon turns up as a Marine Sergeant. It's one of those wartime musicals that goes over the top because of Busby Berkeley. And the eye-popping Technicolor of the time really enhances it as well. I like this one a lot. I had to pick out a Carmen Miranda musical for this. But even though most of the songs aren't particularly memorable, there are a few, like I've Got a Gal in Kalamazoo, and Brazil, of course, and Hail, Hail, the Gang's All Here. The Polka Dot Polka. It works. Because of that, Carmen Miranda's over-the-top persona, mixed with Busby Berkeley. You've got to like that. If I was going to do a second-tier version of this one, probably A Date with Judy, which also has Carmen Miranda dancing with Wallace Beery. Those 1940s kind of wartime or just post-wartime musicals were always interesting. This also has a Benny Goodman orchestra in it, so very much of its time, but still a solid musical. Gangs All Here is a lot of fun. It's in the old Academy ratio, of course, so it's not widescreen. All of the screen is filled up with wonderfulness most of the movie. This was based on a 1960 Broadway musical satirizing the conscription of Elvis Presley into the US Army, and instead of Elvis Presley they got Conrad Birdie, a kind of sleazy and over-the-top rock and roll star, played in this movie by Jesse Pearson, though Dick Gautier played it originally on stage. He's received his draft notice and devastating his teenage fans all over the country. They decide he's going to do a last concert before he goes in the army in Columbus, Ohio. And there's a fan club for Conrad Birdie in Columbus, Ohio. And the biggest fan of all in Columbus, Ohio is Kim, played by Anne Margaret, whose father is played by Paul Lynde. There's a guy trying to sell songs called Albert, played by Dick Van Dyke in his first movie role. His girlfriend, played by Janet Leigh. You got Bobby Rydell in there as well, Maureen Stapleton, Ed Sullivan. And it's great. The dance sequences are great. The musical sequences are great. Paul Lynde is Paul Lynde and great for that. And Anne Margaret is fantastic as Kim. Even at a young age, Anne Margaret put across a certain sultriness, which is very conflicting in this movie. But her and Bobby Rydell, who was known mostly as a pop singer, not an actor, do the dance sequences pretty well. Jesse Pearson, who plays Conrad Birdie, is an interesting guy. Died very early, he's 49, he died of cancer. But in the 1970s, he wrote and directed 2 adult films, which are quite artistic in a very strange way. I've done a quick scroll through them. And yeah, they're artistic, all right, let's just put it that way. So yeah, we're going to end on Jesse Pearson making films for adults in the 1970s. But yeah, there are 13 musicals, which you should check out if you haven't already. I'm not going to do a lot of musicals on this channel, so we're getting back to Science Fiction Saturday on Saturday. But I just thought I'd lance that boil and just do a list of musicals that I really like. They're very diverse. Some of them have got something to say, some of them haven't. Some of them are just a lot of fun. We've got from superheroes to Pacific Islands. We've gone from Conrad Birdie to Thank God It's Friday and Kismet. I'm not going to apologise for liking musicals. I think they're a great entertainment. They're a lot of fun. And each of them in their own way talks to the times in which they were made. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. You can donate through the usual ways, including patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Science Fiction Saturday is happening. I've got to find a couple of science fiction movies I haven't seen before, because I'm only watching movies I haven't seen before in January, which is becoming increasingly difficult. So until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some music or you grumpy buggers. And I'll catch you next time.